From the pulpit of the First Baptist Church of Dallas, Texas, this is Pathway to Victory with Dr. Robert Jeffress.
Hi, I'm Robert Jeffress, and welcome again to Pathway to Victory. One of the greatest challenges Christians face is learning how to live humbly before God. Our human nature constantly pushes us to be in control and to plan our lives as if we're the ones in charge. But the Bible teaches that true godliness requires us to remember a fundamental truth about our human nature. Today, I want to show you two specific ways we try to usurp God's authority and how avoiding those traps will help you grow in godliness. My message is titled, He's God and You're Not, on today's edition of Pathway to Victory.
Where there's genuine faith, there will always be visible fruit. In his brand new book, How to Know If You're Really Saved, Dr. Robert Jeffress helps you take stock of the evidence of your faith, the spiritual fruit in your daily life. This outstanding verse-by-verse walk through the book of James will help you cultivate the spiritual fruit that reflects genuine faith. Request How to Know If You're Really Saved when you give a generous gift to support the ministry of Pathway to Victory.
A doctor said to his patient, I have some bad news and I have some terrible news for you. The patient said, well, what's the bad news? The doctor said, well, the test results came in and you only have 24 hours to live. The patient was stunned. He said, what could be worse than that? The doctor said, I was supposed to have told you yesterday. You know, all of us face uncertain futures, don't we? And that's the thought that James has in mind about why we should live without presumption in our lives. In James 4:10, humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord, and he will exalt you. What does that mean, to humble yourselves? Remember, I referred to comedian Chevy Chase, his signature line at the beginning of his skit. He always began by saying, hi, I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not. Well, that's a real illustration of how we humble ourselves before God. We say, God, I realize you're God, and I'm not. Now, that means more than just intellectually agreeing that you're not God. If you really understand that you and I are not God, we will refrain from two specific actions that attempt to usurp God's power and authority. First of all, James is going to say, if we're going to humble ourselves before God, we must stop judging other people. Listen to verse 11 and 12. Do not speak out against one another, brethren, for he who speaks out against a brother or judges his brother speaks against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you're not a doer of the law, but a judge of it. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what James is saying and what he's not saying. I read a survey not long ago that said for years, the favorite verse of Americans, Christian and non-Christian alike, the favorite Bible verse was, can you remember what it was? Would you like to guess? For years, it's been John 3:16. Remember those guys who would hold up John 3:16 signs at football games? Everybody quoted John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whosoever believes in him would not perish but have everlasting life. But that verse has been replaced as America's favorite verse. You know what America's favorite verse is now? Matthew 7:1. Judge not, lest ye be judged. People don't have a clue what that means. They think in this anything-go culture, it's a blanket pardon for anything you want to do. They treat that verse like a king's ex. If you dare question their activities, they say, oh, judge not, judge not, judge not, lest ye be judged. But was Jesus really saying we're never to make any discerning statement or any evaluation of another person? No. A closer analysis of what Jesus meant is found in verses 1 to 5 of Matthew 7. Hold your place in James 4 and turn over to Matthew 7. Remember, Jesus was James' older brother, and it explains why James quotes Jesus' Sermon on the Mount more than any other New Testament book. Look what Jesus really said about judging. Do not judge so that you will not be judged. For in the way you judge, you will be judged. By the way, circle that line way. It's not judging, it's the way you judge. You will be judged. And by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take that speck out of your eye, and behold, the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First, take the log out of your own eye, and then, circle that, then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. What James is saying, and Jesus both, is don't engage in ungodly judging, an ungodly type, a wrong type of judging. He's not saying don't judge at all, but guard against ungodly judging. What is that? First of all, ungodly judging usurps God's authority to pronounce condemnation. It's usurping only God's right to pronounce condemnation. That word judge in Greek is the word krino, K-R-I-N-O. It is a condemning type of judgment. It's a judgment that says, here is the final verdict on this person. What they've done is unforgivable. They are beyond forgiveness. They are a person who are beyond redemption. James says you can't pronounce that kind of judgment. Only God knows that. Secondly, James says ungodly judging usurps God's ability to discern someone's motivation. Whenever we attempt to discover somebody's motivation for doing something, we're in dangerous territory. That's something only God can do. Remember in 1 Samuel 16:7, it says, man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. Only God knows the full picture. Only God knows a person's heart. Chuck Swindoll tells the experience he had when he was a student at Dallas Seminary. He said they had a missionary speaker come to speak, and the missionary speaker just bombed completely. It was a horrible message and a horrible delivery. And Chuck said he and some of the other students afterwards were standing around and just criticizing this missionary and talking about how awful he was, when another student approached them, heard what was going on, and said, Chuck, there's something you may not know. 2 hours before the meeting tonight, this speaker received a telephone call telling him that his youngest son had died. But he wanted to keep the engagement and be faithful to deliver the message. Well, you can imagine how that made Chuck feel. But it was a good lesson, he said, about resisting trying to judge people when you don't know the whole story. Only God sees a person's heart. And that's why James says in verse 12 of chapter 4, there's only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and to destroy, but who are you to judge your neighbor? There's only one judge who can make righteous and correct judgments, and he's going to do that one day. Every deed is going to be judged, but it's when he returns. Don't try to take his role now. James 5:9 says, do not complain, brethren, against one another, so that you yourselves may not be judged. Behold, the judge, and he's talking about Jesus, is standing right at the door. He's about to come back. His return is imminent, and he will judge the righteous and the unrighteous. If we're going to be a godly person, if we're going to become godly in our character, we must refrain from judging other people. Secondly, we must stop presumptuous planning. Now, this is an interesting topic. Presumptuous planning. Look at what he says in verses 13 and 14. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we shall go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit, yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You're a vapor, just a vapor, that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Now, I was having a discussion with one of my daughters about this yesterday. We were talking about what this verse means and doesn't mean. He's not saying don't make plans. The Bible is not against setting goals and making plans. In fact, you look at the Bible, there are all kinds of examples of God honoring planning. For example, consider the book of Proverbs written by Solomon. James quotes Solomon more than any other New Testament writer. What does Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, have to say about planning? Listen to Proverbs 15:22. Without consultation, plans are frustrated, but with many counselors, plans succeed. Or Proverbs 16:1, the plans of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. Proverbs 16:3, commit your works to the Lord and your what? Plans will be established. Proverbs 20:18, prepare plans. Make your plans by consultation and make war by wise guidance. Or Proverbs 21:5, the plans of the diligent lead surely to advantage, but everyone who is hasty comes surely to poverty. Retail store mogul J.C. Penney, who was a great Christian, said, give me a stock clerk with a goal, and I'll give you a man who makes history. Give me a man without a goal, and I give you a stock clerk. He was talking about the importance of planning. What James is condemning here is planning without any thought of God. Presumptuous planning. Planning your life, living your life as if there was no God. In verse 15, he said, instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. If the Lord wills, we will do this. That phrase, if the Lord wills, is not some superfluous prefix added on to make things more godly. Oh, if God wills, and I'm going to go ahead. No, it means a mindset. It means realizing that all of our life, all of our plans hinge on the sovereignty of God. To say, if the Lord wills, it means to live your life under the sovereignty of God. It means to make God central in your planning for the future. Why should we do that? Why should we keep God central in our lives? James gives us 4 reasons. First of all, because of the brevity of life. Look again at verse 14. You don't know what your life will be like tomorrow. Your life, you, are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Have you ever gone outside when it's cold, below freezing, and watched your breath just hang in the air for a few minutes, few seconds, and then suddenly disappear? James is saying that's what your life is like. It's like a mist. The word is atmos, a mist. It appears for a little while, and then it vanishes. Have you ever considered how brief your life is here on earth? I discovered this some time ago. If you live to an average age of 70, boy, that seems younger every day. The age of 70, you've been given 2,207,520,000 seconds of life. Now, that may seem like a lot, 2 billion seconds of life. But if you're 40 or more, how many of you are 40 or more? Confessional. If you're 40 or more, you've already used up 1,261,000,000 of those seconds. Means you only have 946 million of seconds left. But that's not all. Of those 946 million seconds, you're going to spend 315 million seconds sleeping. You're going to spend 59,130,000 seconds eating. Some of you more than that. Furthermore, you're going to spend 1,200 seconds just listening to me in the next few minutes, leaving you with only 570,157,000 seconds of life. And they're going by just like that. The brevity of life. Why should we make God central in our lives? Not only is life brief, but it's filled with uncertainty. He says in verse 14, you don't know what your life will be like tomorrow. You have no idea what your life is going to be like tomorrow. That's why you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. Have you discovered how uncertain life is? I'll never forget having a friend, an acquaintance who lived in another state, who was planning to come to Texas to attend the seminary and go into ministry. He was so excited about beginning seminary. But while he was having lunch in a restaurant in his home state, he felt something crawling up his leg. And he didn't know what to do but to swat it. And when he swatted it, whatever it was bit his leg. And out of his pants leg fell a dead spider. He didn't think anything about it. But the man seated next to him said, son, you better go to the hospital immediately. He said, why do I need to go to the hospital? He said, that's a brown recluse spider. It's extremely poisonous. My friend went to the hospital. Soon he lost all the feeling in that leg. Gangrene set in. He ended up having his leg amputated and losing one of his kidneys, and in the process racked up over $250,000 in medical expenses. His plans to go to seminary and into the ministry changed just like that. That's why we need to remember the sovereignty of God when we're making our plans. For you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. Why should we make God central in our lives? Thirdly, James says, because of the emptiness of success. Come now, those who say today we'll go to such and such a city and engage in business and make a profit. Notice in James 5, verses 1 to 3, there were no chapter divisions in the original text. This is all part of the same discussion. Look at what he says about money. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries which are coming upon you. For your riches have rotted, and your garments have become moth-eaten. Your gold and your silver have rusted, and their rust will be witness against you and will consume your flesh like fire. It is in the last days that you have stored up your treasure. Have you discovered how fleeting money can be? Have you been watching as your 401ks became 101ks over the last few days? You know, the Bible is correct. Riches are like eagles that sprout wings and fly to the clouds. Money that is earned can be so easily lost. And that's why Solomon, who was the wealthiest man of his day, who was the most powerful king in Israel's history, who built the temple, he said about all of his achievements as he was an old man looking back, worthless, worthless. Everything in life is worthless. And he came to the conclusion in chapter 12, verse 1 of Ecclesiastes, therefore remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you say, I find no pleasure in them. Why should we not engage in presumptuous living? Why should we remember God, make him central in our life? Finally, James says, because of our accountability to God. Look at chapter 5, verses 7 and 9. Therefore be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. Do not complain, brethren, against one another, so that you yourselves may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing right at the door. For all our jokes about dying and standing at the pearly gates and talking to St. Peter, there'll be nothing really funny when we meet God for our judgment. And by the way, we're all going to be judged by Jesus Christ. Hebrews 9:27 says, it's appointed unto every one of us once to die, and then the judgment. Non-Christians will face the great white throne judgment. Revelation chapter 20, where John says, if any man's name was not written in the book of life, he was cast into the lake of fire and tormented day and night forever and ever. We Christians don't have to fear the great white throne judgment. We've been forgiven. Our sins have been taken away. But that doesn't mean God's not going to evaluate our life. He is. It's a different judgment. The Bema, the judgment seat of Christ. 2 Corinthians 5, 9 and 10. For we have as our ambition, whether here or at home, to be pleasing to God. Why? Because we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one of us may be rewarded for what we've done in the body, whether it be good or worthless. Whether it's the great white throne judgment or the judgment seat of Christ, the writer of Hebrews said, it is a fearful thing to be in the hands of the living God. We are all ultimately accountable to God. That's why we need to make God central in our lives before it's too late. I remember years ago reading the account of a girl who was driving with 4 of her best friends in the car. And the car was going much too fast. It hit a concrete embankment. The car flipped over 4 times. For the next 5 hours, rescue workers tried to free the passengers in that car. The driver listened to her best friends, to their moaning, to their weeping as each one passed into eternity. Later, the rescue workers were able to save the girl that was driving. A reporter asked her what it was like being trapped in that car for hours. What did her friends say in the final moments of their life? And she said, each one of them died saying the same thing. Oh God, no, no, no. Oh God, no. You understand, don't you? We're all going to face that same future. We're going to die. It may or may not be in a car wreck. It may not be today or tomorrow, but it's coming. And at that point, we're going to stand before the judgment of God. That's why Solomon says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth before the days of trouble come. For every act will be judged by God, whether hidden, whether it be good, or whether it be evil.
None of us knows what tomorrow will bring. Life is brief and uncertain, and we're all ultimately accountable to God for how we've lived. That's why it's so important for us to humble ourselves before God today. Well, I'm deeply grateful for those of you who faithfully support Pathway to Victory through your generous giving. Your partnership allows us to reach millions of people around the world with the life-changing truth of God's Word. Every day, we're able to broadcast this program on television, radio, and digital platforms that reach around the world and across our nation. And it's all made possible because of friends like you who believe in the mission of Pathway to Victory. Whether you're a Pathway partner or you send an occasional gift, your support is making an eternal difference in the lives of countless individuals. So, thank you for joining us in our mission to pierce the darkness with the light of God's Word. Now, stay right there. I'll be back with more Pathway to Victory in just a moment.
Every believer wants to see clear evidence of their spiritual growth and discover the fruit that God is producing in their lives. Dr. Robert Jeffress shows you exactly how to recognize that fruit in his brand new book, How to Know If You're Really Saved.
The book of James teaches us that the Christian life is about more than just knowing God's Word. It's about living it out. In my new book, How to Know If You're Really Saved, I'll walk you through what it truly means to be a doer of the Word, showing you how to respond to trials, control your speech, endure hardships, resist temptation, and so much more.
This outstanding 232-page book will help you examine the evidence of your faith and see the spiritual fruit that should be growing in your daily life. Request your copy of How to Know If You're Really Saved when you give a generous gift to support the ministry of Pathway to Victory, or when you become a Pathway partner. With your ministry gift of $75 or more, we'll send you not just the book, but also the personal and group study guide and the complete message series on both CD and DVD.
If you are truly saved, there's going to be evidence of it. There are some tests that you need to apply to your life.
Thank you for your generous support of Pathway to Victory. Your partnership helps us bring bold, biblical, and practical teaching into homes across the nation and around the world.
Learning to live humbly before God isn't always easy for our self-centered nature. But when we remember that He's in control and we're not, it changes everything about how we approach life. Well, does God still heal people today the way He did in biblical times? And how do we account for all the claims of healing that we hear about? Next time, we'll discover what the Bible really teaches about divine healing. Stay tuned for a preview of what's coming up next in our series, How to Know If You're Really Saved.
Sometimes we're allowed to be sick so that God can be glorified through our healing. Many times it is through our sickness that God is best glorified. That's what Paul said. Paul said, "It is when I was weak that the power of God was most strongly manifest in me."
Set your DVR and join us next time for the message, The Truth About Faith Kneeling, here on Pathway to Victory. Take a journey through Alaska's awe-inspiring wilderness on the 2026 Pathway to Victory Cruise to Alaska with Dr. Robert Jeffress aboard Holland America's magnificent Koningsdam. Share laughter with Dennis Swanberg. Be inspired by award-winning musician Michael O'Brien's powerful worship. Make plans to set sail for an unforgettable week of adventure, June 13 through 20, 2026. Call 888-280-6747 or visit ptv.org.